It was a quiet afternoon in one of the tallest office buildings in the city. The kind of quiet that feels almost unnatural in a place where people are always moving, typing, and talking. The sunlight spilled across the polished floors, glinting off the glass walls and giving the whole office a warm, golden glow. Most employees were busy at their desks, heads down, phones ringing, and keyboards clicking, all caught in the endless rhythm of work. But in her office, the billionaire sat behind a large mahogany desk, reviewing a pile of documents, her focus unbroken. She was known across the company for her strict rules, her sharp mind, and the ability to make decisions faster than most people could even understand them. She demanded perfection, expected respect, and believed that the smallest mistake could cost a person their place in her company. Her employees often tiptoed around her, careful with every word, careful with every action, careful not to draw attention to themselves in the wrong way. That's why when she walked out of her office for a brief meeting and returned, she wasn't prepared for what she saw. At first, she thought her eyes were playing tricks on her. There, in the center of her leather chair, was a man sleeping. A stranger, someone who clearly didn't belong there, was curled up in her expensive chair, head tilted slightly to one side, chest rising and falling in slow, even breaths. The initial shock froze her in place. She could feel her heart pounding, not from fear, but from disbelief. Who in their right mind would do such a thing? Her chair was not just any chair. It was a symbol of her power, her control, and her hard work. Seeing a man asleep in it felt like a violation, and yet, something about the sight made her pause. He looked ordinary at first glance, wearing the uniform of the cleaning staff, a simple shirt and trousers that had seen better days. His shoes were scuffed, and his hands showed signs of long hours of labor. But it wasn't just his appearance that caught her attention. There was a sense of exhaustion in the way he rested, a heaviness that went beyond normal tiredness. This wasn't someone who had fallen asleep for a few minutes after a light shift. This was someone utterly drained, carrying a weight that wasn't just physical. For a moment, she simply watched him, curiosity slowly replacing anger. Why would someone do this? How could he be so tired that he risked falling asleep in her private office, in her chair? She took a step closer and the man stirred. His eyes opened slowly, confusion clouding them. When he realized where he was, panic flashed across his face. He scrambled to sit upright, almost knocking over a stack of papers on her desk. His voice, low and hurried, stumbled over an apology. He explained that he had meant to rest for just a moment, that he hadn't thought anyone would see him. His words were rushed, almost spilling out faster than he could catch them. But there was honesty in his tone. He wasn't making excuses. He wasn't trying to hide anything. He simply looked like a man who had been carrying too much for too long. As he spoke, she noticed the signs that told the story of his life. The sleeves of his shirt were worn, frayed at the edges. His hands had tiny cuts and marks, evidence of manual labor and long days. His shoes were old, and the soles had begun to separate, a silent testament to the miles he must have walked in them. There was a faint smell of soap and cleaning products, but also of weariness, like a scent that clung to him from months, maybe years of hard work. He was not just tired, he was exhausted in a way that went beyond sleep. And that was when something inside her shifted, a subtle change she didn't fully understand. She asked him to sit down to explain why he had been here. His voice was quieter now, and he told her a story that she wasn't expecting. He was a single father, raising a young daughter on his own. He had 2 jobs, one during the day cleaning offices and another at night, taking on odd shifts wherever he could find them. He barely slept, and most of his meals were skipped or eaten in a rush. All his life, he said, he had worked to provide a safe, stable environment for his daughter, someone who deserved more than he could easily give. He admitted that today had been particularly difficult. His daughter had been sick, and he had stayed up all night helping her, then went straight to work, and by the time he had a quiet moment, exhaustion had overtaken him. As she listened, she realized how little she actually knew about the lives of the people who kept her company running smoothly. She had seen them in passing, noticed their faces, sometimes their mistakes, but she had never thought about the stories behind those faces. Here was someone who was literally giving everything he had to keep his child safe and cared for, someone whose life was a constant struggle, and yet he showed up every day without complaint. She could see it in his eyes, in the way he held himself, a quiet strength that went unnoticed by most people, and yet there it was. For the first time, she didn't feel anger. She didn't feel irritation. She felt something else. Curiosity, empathy. A subtle realization that the world outside her office walls was far more complicated than she had assumed. She asked him more questions, and he answered honestly, telling her about the challenges, the long nights, the worry, the exhaustion, and also the small joys, his daughter's laugh, the pride of seeing her learn something new, the moments of love that made everything worth it. Every word painted a picture of struggle and devotion that she could not ignore. The conversation went on for what felt like hours, though in reality, only a few minutes had passed. She found herself leaning back in her chair, listening, really listening, to someone whose life had been invisible to her until this moment. She realized that she had judged people too quickly, expected too much without understanding, and now, in this quiet, unexpected encounter, she was seeing the human side of someone she would have otherwise overlooked. Finally, she did something that shocked even herself. She didn't scold him. She didn't fire him. She didn't call for security. She simply offered help. Not the kind of help that demanded repayment or gratitude, but the kind that recognized effort, struggle, and humanity. She suggested that he take some time to rest, that she could make arrangements to ensure he didn't have to push himself to the breaking point. She offered small assistance to help him and his daughter through the immediate difficulties, and her tone was gentle, sincere, and without judgment. As he left her office that day, a mixture of disbelief and gratitude on his face, she sat alone for a moment, thinking. This one small incident, a man sleeping in her chair, had made her reconsider the way she viewed people. It had reminded her that behind every uniform, behind every face, was a story, a struggle, a life full of challenges and victories that no one else might see. And though she was a billionaire, someone who controlled immense power, she realized that sometimes the most important influence one could have was not in commands or money, but in understanding and empathy. And so, what began as a shocking discovery, someone sleeping in her chair, became something much larger. It became a lesson in humanity, a reminder that everyone has a story worth hearing, and that sometimes kindness and curiosity could change a life in ways that money or authority never could. She didn't know yet how far this encounter would reach, or how much it would ripple through the lives of everyone in her company. All she knew was that something inside her had shifted, and for the first time in a long time, she felt a deep connection to someone she had never met before, a connection that would shape the days and decisions to come. After that unexpected encounter in her office, the billionaire couldn't stop thinking about the man she had found sleeping in her chair. It was strange how a single moment could linger in your mind, refusing to leave even when you tried to focus on your work. All afternoon, she felt a quiet unrest. Her usual calm, composed self seemed unsettled, and she realized that the image of him, tired, worn, and quietly desperate, had left a mark on her. She found herself reflecting not only on him but on the countless people in her company whose lives she had never tried to understand. For the first time, she wondered about the challenges they faced outside the glass walls of her office. Later that evening, when most of the staff had left, she decided to call him back. She didn't want to embarrass him in front of anyone, and she didn't want him to feel like this was some kind of test. She just wanted to understand. When he arrived, there was a subtle tension in the air. He seemed unsure, hesitant even, as if he feared that something had gone terribly wrong and that she might be angry or disappointed. But when he saw her, there was no stern glare or scolding. Instead, she simply gestured to a chair, inviting him to sit. He lowered himself carefully into the chair, hands clasped together, eyes flicking to the floor. She noticed the nervousness in his posture, the kind that comes from always being careful, always measuring yourself against the expectations of others. She started with a simple question. "Tell me about your day," she said, her tone gentle, almost conversational. He hesitated, then began to speak, telling her about the morning, how he had woken up before dawn to make breakfast for his daughter, the long commute, the endless cleaning tasks, the moments when he had to pause just to catch his breath. His voice was calm but full of weight, each word carrying the weight of years of struggle. As he spoke, she realized that she had never really listened to people like him before. She had been so focused on schedules, deadlines, and profits that she hadn't stopped to think about the lives of the people who kept her business running smoothly. She saw the toll it took on him, the sleepless nights, the constant worry, the physical exhaustion, but she also saw something else. There was resilience in him, a quiet strength that didn't need to be loud or showy. Despite everything, he continued to push forward, doing what needed to be done for the person he loved most, his daughter. He spoke about her with a softness that contrasted sharply with the hard lines of his daily life. Every sentence about her was filled with pride and care. He described her small victories, her laughter, the way she clung to him when she needed comfort. He spoke about his fears, too, the fear of not providing enough, of failing her, of watching her struggle because he couldn't do more. Listening to him, she realized that his love was a driving force, the reason he could endure such hardships without complaint. She was struck by the contrast between his strength and his vulnerability, and for the first time, she felt a deep sense of respect for someone she had only just met. The billionaire found herself asking questions, not to challenge him but to understand. She asked how he managed to balance work and caring for his daughter, how he stayed motivated, and what kept him going during the hardest days. Each answer revealed a new layer of his life, showing her a man who was strong yet gentle, exhausted yet determined, ordinary yet extraordinary. She noticed the small details, the calluses on his hands from scrubbing floors, the tired but alert look in his eyes, the way he listened carefully to her questions as if every word mattered. At one point, he admitted something that made her pause. He had fallen asleep in her chair not out of carelessness, but because he had reached a point where his body could not keep up with his life. He explained that he often skipped meals, pushed through pain, and ignored his own needs to make sure his daughter had what she needed. The words hung in the air, heavy with honesty, and she realized that this man had been giving his all, every single day, without complaint, without recognition, without a single person really noticing. The billionaire's initial reaction, shock and frustration, had completely vanished. Instead, she felt a surprising surge of compassion. She had never imagined herself in the position of someone who worked tirelessly and silently for the sake of someone else. She had money, power, and resources, but she had rarely considered the value of empathy and understanding in her everyday interactions. She realized that this moment, this conversation, was teaching her something she could not have learned from books, meetings, or reports. It was a lesson in humanity, humility, and the quiet dignity of people who work without applause. She leaned back in her own chair, observing him closely. His tired eyes met hers, and she saw something she hadn't expected. A glimmer of hope. Even in exhaustion, there was a spark, a belief that someone might see him, truly see him, for who he was. She recognized that she could be the person to acknowledge that effort, to give a small measure of relief to someone who had carried too much for too long. Without saying it outright, she communicated through her tone, her posture, and her attentive listening that she understood. That understanding, she realized, was sometimes more powerful than money or orders. For the next hour, they spoke quietly, sharing stories of challenges, hopes, and dreams. He talked about the small things that brought him joy, the little victories that made each day worthwhile. She shared some of her own experiences. Not her wealth or her power, but her struggles to understand people, to balance responsibility with humanity, and to recognize the lives of those around her. It was an unusual conversation, intimate yet professional, honest yet respectful. And with every word, the tension in the room eased, replaced by a mutual recognition of effort, resilience, and the small but significant victories of daily life. When he finally stood to leave, she surprised him by offering something he hadn't expected. She didn't just ask him to continue working, nor did she simply offer words of encouragement. She offered a concrete gesture of support, help with his immediate struggles. She suggested a small financial advance, enough to cover urgent needs for his daughter, and promised to arrange a more manageable schedule that would allow him time to rest and care for her. His eyes widened, disbelief mixed with gratitude, as he struggled to find words. For someone who had been invisible for so long, for someone who had carried the weight of his world alone, this gesture felt monumental. As he left her office, there was a visible change in him. His shoulders seemed lighter, his steps more confident, and there was a softness in his expression that hadn't been there before. She watched him go, a quiet sense of satisfaction settling over her. She had always believed that power and money could solve problems, but this moment reminded her that sometimes true impact comes from seeing someone, really seeing them, and offering support without judgment. That night, she stayed in her office long after everyone had left, thinking about the encounter. She realized that this was not just a one-time act of kindness. It was an opportunity to rethink how she approached her company, her employees, and even her own life. She considered the countless people who worked silently behind the scenes, the single parents, the exhausted staff, the individuals whose efforts often went unnoticed. She knew she had the ability to make a difference in small but meaningful ways, and she felt a responsibility to do so. She also thought about the cleaner himself, the single dad who had opened up to her. His honesty, resilience, and love for his daughter had left an impression she could not shake. She wondered how many others were like him, working tirelessly, sacrificing their own comfort, carrying invisible burdens. The realization was humbling, and it sparked a determination within her to act, to create changes that could help not just him, but others in similar situations. In the days that followed, she began taking steps. She spoke to her management team about more flexible schedules, emergency support for employees in need, and ways to recognize the efforts of those often overlooked. She wanted to create an environment where people felt seen, valued, and supported, not just for their work, but for who they were as human beings. And though it started with a simple act, offering understanding and a small measure of help, it quickly began to grow into something much larger. Meanwhile, the cleaner returned to work with a renewed sense of purpose. He felt seen, respected, and supported in ways he hadn't thought possible. The stress of his daily life hadn't disappeared, but knowing that someone in a position of power cared about his struggles gave him hope. He could rest without guilt, plan for his daughter's future without constant fear, and work with a sense of dignity that had been missing before. Every day, he carried a quiet gratitude for the woman who had taken a few minutes to listen, understand, and offer support when it mattered most. This encounter, which began with something as simple as a man falling asleep in a chair, was far more than it seemed. It was a moment of connection, empathy, and recognition that transcended titles, money, and status. It reminded both of them that humanity could exist in even the most unexpected places and that sometimes the smallest gestures could have the biggest impact. The billionaire, once known only for her strict rules and unyielding standards, found herself changed in subtle but profound ways. She had learned that leadership wasn't just about power or control. It was about understanding, compassion, and recognizing the lives and struggles of those around her. And for the cleaner, this encounter had given him more than just support. It had given him hope, dignity, and a renewed sense of purpose that he carried into every day thereafter. What began as a shocking, almost inconvenient moment had become a turning point, one that neither of them would ever forget. It was a reminder that sometimes, the people we least expect to teach us something valuable end up teaching the most important lessons of all. And in that quiet office on that ordinary day, two very different lives had intersected in a way that would ripple far beyond what either of them could have imagined. The days after that conversation were quiet at first, but the effect of it was slowly beginning to show. The billionaire returned to her usual routine, but everything felt slightly different. She noticed the little things, the tired faces of employees, the way people hurried from task to task, trying to keep up with demands while juggling lives outside the office. She realized that her company had been running efficiently, yes, but with little consideration for the people who made it run. Something about seeing the single dad asleep in her chair had awakened a part of her she had almost forgotten. The part that understood that everyone had struggles, everyone had challenges, and everyone deserved at least a bit of compassion. Meanwhile, the cleaner returned to his daily routine with a newfound energy. The simple fact that someone of authority had acknowledged his hard work had made a profound difference. It wasn't just the financial help she had offered. It was the recognition, the understanding that someone saw him for more than just a worker with a broom in hand. He went about his days with a quiet pride, carrying out his duties carefully, yet with a lightness in his step that had not been there before. His coworkers noticed it too. Some of them, long used to seeing him tired and strained, were surprised to see him smile more often, to hear his laughter echo in the hallways. Word began to spread, though carefully. The billionaire was not one to boast about her actions, but people noticed small changes in her behavior. She asked questions about employees' well-being during meetings, offered extra support to those facing hardships, and took the time to listen. The staff began to whisper among themselves, noting the difference in her demeanor. Some were shocked. After all, she had always been known as strict and unyielding. Yet now, they saw glimpses of kindness, glimpses of empathy, that few had expected from her. One morning, the cleaner received a message that surprised him. The billionaire wanted to speak with him privately again. This time, there was no fear or hesitation. He walked to her office with a sense of curiosity and cautious hope. She greeted him with the same calm tone as before, inviting him to sit down. For a moment, neither of them spoke, both understanding that this meeting would not be ordinary. She began by asking how he and his daughter were doing. She wanted to know if the assistance she had offered had helped and whether there was anything else he needed. As he spoke, he shared the improvements he had noticed in his own life. He had been able to spend more time with his daughter, to take care of small but important tasks that had previously gone undone, and to rest when necessary. His daughter's laughter had returned, brighter than it had been in months. She listened, nodding, genuinely interested, and realized that small gestures of support could make a significant impact. In that moment, she understood the real value of empathy. It wasn't about grand gestures or expensive gifts. It was about seeing someone, listening, and offering meaningful help when it mattered most. She decided to take things further. Her company had resources, after all, and there were countless employees who faced difficulties similar to his. She began developing programs to support those in need, from flexible schedules to emergency childcare, from financial assistance to counseling. The cleaner's situation had opened her eyes to a broader reality, one where people often struggled quietly, unseen, and yet were vital to the success of the company. By creating systems to help them, she was not only improving their lives but also fostering loyalty, trust, and a sense of belonging within the company. The ripple effect was immediate. Employees began to feel valued. Staff who had once kept their challenges hidden now felt comfortable sharing them. They knew that they would not be judged or dismissed, that their difficulties would be acknowledged and supported. Morale improved, productivity increased, and a sense of community began to grow. People smiled more often, conversations became warmer, and a culture of understanding began to take root. The billionaire, once distant and intimidating, became approachable. People respected her not only for her intelligence and decisiveness but for her compassion and willingness to see the human side of work. The cleaner himself became something of an informal ambassador for this new approach. Colleagues noticed how he treated others with patience, care, and encouragement, despite his own struggles. He shared small insights about balancing work and life, offering tips that had helped him manage exhaustion and stress. His experiences became lessons for others, showing that even in difficult circumstances, resilience and hope could flourish. And all of this began with a simple encounter. Someone noticing that he had fallen asleep in a chair and choosing to respond with understanding instead of anger. Outside of work, the cleaner's life began to stabilize. He could afford small comforts for his daughter, and he had more time to spend with her. She was happier, healthier, and more secure, and he felt a deep sense of relief. For years, he had been running on empty, but now he had support and space to breathe. The billionaire had not solved all of his problems, but she had given him what he needed most: recognition, empathy, and the confidence that he was not alone. It was a reminder that human connection, even in the most unexpected forms, could be transformative. The billionaire herself felt a subtle change within. She noticed how good it felt to help without expecting anything in return, to see someone's life improve because of her understanding and action. She reflected on the ways she had previously judged people too quickly, measured them by appearances or performance alone, and now realized that there was a richness in understanding the whole person, the struggles, the sacrifices, and the efforts that went unseen. Leadership, she learned, was not just about directing and achieving results but about lifting people up, helping them thrive in ways that money alone could not. As weeks turned into months, the culture she had started to shift grew stronger. Managers were trained to recognize and support employees facing challenges. Small programs were implemented to offer emergency assistance, and staff felt a renewed sense of purpose. The cleaner's story became an unspoken example of the impact that one act of understanding could have. Employees began to take notice of each other's efforts, support each other more actively, and approach work with a shared sense of responsibility and humanity. The office became not just a place of business but a community where people cared for one another, where struggles were acknowledged, and where resilience was celebrated. At times, the billionaire would observe quietly, seeing how her actions had affected not only the cleaner but the entire office. She saw smiles, heard laughter, and noticed employees helping each other without prompting. She realized that her leadership was more than just enforcing rules or setting expectations. It was about fostering an environment where people felt seen, valued, and supported. It was about encouraging human connection in a place that had previously been all about efficiency and performance. The cleaner continued to work diligently, but now with a lightness in his spirit. He found himself thinking less about exhaustion and more about the moments he could enjoy with his daughter, the small victories he could celebrate, and the opportunities to grow. He became more confident, more hopeful, and more connected to the people around him. His relationship with the billionaire had grown into a quiet respect, mutual acknowledgement of effort and understanding that transcended titles or positions. Occasionally, he would catch a glimpse of her in the hallway or see her speaking with employees, and he felt a deep appreciation for the way she had changed. She had taught him, without words, that recognition and compassion mattered, that even small gestures could ripple outward to create profound impact. And he, in turn, had reminded her that humanity could not be measured by power or money alone, that real strength lay in understanding, listening, and lifting others when they were struggling. One day, a colleague quietly mentioned to the billionaire that they had heard about her kindness from other staff members. People were talking, not in gossip, but in admiration, about the way she had handled the situation with the cleaner. It was a small thing, but it carried weight. She realized that sometimes the most powerful influence was not in announcements, speeches, or directives, but in quiet actions, in moments where someone chose to notice, to care, and to act with empathy. The story of a man sleeping in a chair had grown into something far larger, shaping the culture of an entire workplace and teaching lessons about humanity, respect, and connection. Even outside the office, the impact continued. The cleaner's daughter noticed the difference too. Her father was less stressed, more patient, and able to spend time with her in ways he hadn't before. She saw the relief in his eyes, the lighter steps, and the moments of genuine laughter and joy. And for him, that was the greatest reward. Knowing that his daughter could feel secure, loved, and happy made every effort worthwhile. The billionaire's understanding had not just changed his life. It had changed hers, in ways neither of them could have predicted. The ripple effect of that one afternoon was still unfolding. Employees spoke to one another differently, approached challenges with more compassion, and recognized the hidden efforts of those around them. The billionaire, who had once been distant and intimidating, became a leader people admired not only for her intelligence but for her humanity. And the cleaner, once invisible and exhausted, became a quiet example of resilience, hope, and the power of being seen. In the end, the encounter that started with a man sleeping in a chair was more than just a moment of surprise. It was a lesson about empathy, understanding, and the power of noticing someone when they are struggling. It was about realizing that everyone carries burdens unseen, and that sometimes the right response is not judgment or reprimand, but compassion, patience, and support. And as the days passed, both the billionaire and the cleaner felt the truth of that lesson deeply, in ways that would shape their actions, their relationships, and the lives of those around them for years to come. The days that followed continued to reveal the unexpected power of one small act. The billionaire began to notice changes in the office she hadn't anticipated. People were talking to each other differently, greeting one another with smiles, helping with tasks without being asked. Even small gestures, holding the door open, carrying someone's stack of papers, asking a colleague if they were feeling okay, started to happen more naturally. She realized that her choice to respond with empathy, rather than anger, had set a tone for the entire workplace. The energy in the office shifted. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but slowly it became undeniable. The cleaner became a central part of this shift. His work had always been steady even under pressure, but now there was a noticeable change in the way he moved through the office. He smiled more, greeted coworkers warmly, and occasionally offered advice or encouragement. It wasn't that he suddenly had more authority or power, but there was a confidence about him that came from being recognized and understood. People started noticing that confidence, and it inspired them. They saw that even someone who carried great responsibility outside of work could thrive when given support, and it reminded them to support each other as well. The billionaire took this a step further. She began to implement small programs to help employees facing challenges. She created a system for emergency support, allowing staff to request assistance if they were in difficult situations. She arranged for flexible schedules so single parents, caregivers, and those with heavy responsibilities could manage their time without fear of losing their jobs. She even organized casual meetings where employees could speak openly about struggles without judgment. The office, once all business and efficiency, slowly transformed into a place where humanity mattered as much as productivity. Word spread beyond the walls of the office. Employees spoke of the billionaire's empathy, of the way she had handled the situation with the cleaner, and of the small changes she had made to improve their lives. Her reputation as a strict and sometimes intimidating boss began to shift. People still respected her intelligence and decisiveness, but now they also admired her for her ability to see people as human beings with struggles, hopes, and dreams. She was no longer someone to be feared. She was someone to be respected and even admired. The cleaner's daughter noticed changes in her father as well. He returned home each evening more relaxed, more present, and with a smile that had been missing for a long time. They spent evenings together, doing homework, cooking meals, and laughing over stories from the day. For the first time in months, perhaps even years, she felt secure knowing that her father could care for her without being completely exhausted. It wasn't just about money or material needs. It was about his presence, his ability to enjoy small moments, and his renewed hope for the future. One day, the billionaire observed an interaction that made her pause. She saw the cleaner helping another employee carry a heavy box, guiding them with patience and care. It was a small act, almost ordinary, but she recognized the significance. He had learned to carry more than just his own burdens. He was now helping others bear theirs. The office culture was changing not because of rules or policies, but because people were noticing each other, offering support, and understanding struggles that had previously gone unseen. She realized that her initial choice to act with kindness had sparked a ripple effect far larger than she could have imagined. The cleaner's story soon inspired others. Employees began sharing their own experiences, talking about challenges they faced at home or difficulties in managing work and life. The billionaire listened, offering support and guidance where possible, and ensuring that resources were available. She encouraged managers to do the same, fostering a culture where people felt safe to speak openly. Employees no longer hid their struggles or suffered in silence. They learned that asking for help was not a weakness, but a part of being human, and that the office could be a place where people supported each other, rather than merely a place to produce results. At the same time, the billionaire began to see changes within herself. She had always been focused on results, on efficiency, on numbers and performance, but she now realized that leadership required more than that. True leadership, she learned, meant understanding the people behind the work, seeing their humanity, and offering support where it was needed most. She began to take a genuine interest in her employees' lives, asking questions about their families, their hobbies, and their challenges. She became approachable, not by lowering her standards, but by demonstrating that compassion and understanding were equally important. The ripple effect extended beyond the office walls. The cleaner's story quietly reached other companies through employees who shared experiences with friends and family. People admired how a billionaire, someone with immense power and resources, had taken the time to understand and support a single father struggling to care for his child. It was a reminder that acts of kindness, no matter how small they may seem, could inspire others to do the same. The office became known not just for its efficiency, but for its culture of care and support. Meanwhile, the cleaner continued to thrive. He managed his responsibilities with a new sense of confidence and pride. He no longer feared falling behind or failing, because he knew that support was available if needed. His daughter thrived as well, enjoying the presence of her father and the stability that had been missing from their lives. Together, they found small joys in each day, playing games, reading stories, cooking meals, and sharing laughter. Life was far from perfect, but for the first time in a long while it felt manageable and even hopeful. The billionaire watched this quietly, noticing the subtle changes in those around her. Employees were more collaborative, more patient, and more willing to offer help. They were happier, more engaged, and more connected to the company's mission. She realized that the true measure of success wasn't just profit or productivity, but the well-being and growth of the people who made it all possible. The small act of understanding and supporting one man had created a positive shift that affected everyone around him, and she began to see the importance of fostering a culture that valued people as much as results. One afternoon, she called a staff meeting. Not a formal meeting about profits or strategy, but a gathering to recognize effort and celebrate humanity. She spoke honestly, sharing observations about the hard work, dedication, and challenges she had noticed among the employees. She highlighted small acts of kindness, perseverance, and resilience, encouraging everyone to support each other and take notice of the struggles others might be facing. The atmosphere was unlike any meeting before, warm, engaging, and full of mutual respect. Employees felt seen, valued, and appreciated, and the billionaire felt a deep sense of fulfillment knowing that her words were making a difference. The cleaner, sitting quietly among his colleagues, felt a mixture of pride and gratitude. He knew that the billionaire's acknowledgement went beyond him. It represented the changes she was making to support everyone in the office. He had learned a valuable lesson as well, that resilience, honesty, and a willingness to seek help when needed could lead to unexpected opportunities and recognition. He smiled to himself, thinking about the journey that had begun with an exhausted nap in a chair, and how far things had come since that single moment. As the days turned into weeks, the impact grew stronger. New employees joining the company quickly noticed the culture of support and empathy. Managers were trained not only to evaluate performance but to understand challenges, to offer guidance, and to provide resources when needed. The office became a place where people felt safe, valued, and inspired to do their best work, not out of fear or obligation, but out of a genuine desire to contribute and support one another. The billionaire realized that her influence extended far beyond decisions and directives. It was her ability to foster humanity and understanding that had the most profound effect. Outside the office, the cleaner's life continued to improve. He was able to create a more stable environment for his daughter, spending evenings reading to her, helping with homework, and enjoying small family moments he had previously missed. Their bond grew stronger, filled with laughter, trust, and mutual care. The support he received had not solved every problem, but it had given him the space to breathe, to plan, and to live without constant fear and exhaustion. Every day, he was reminded that even small gestures of kindness could create lasting change. The billionaire continued to observe, listen, and act. She made it a habit to check in with employees, to understand their struggles, and to provide support whenever possible. She had learned that leadership required not just intellect and strategy, but compassion and attentiveness. Every employee mattered, not only for the work they produced but for the lives they lived outside the office. She realized that by fostering empathy and connection, she was creating an environment where people thrived, and that in turn strengthened the company as a whole. Months later, the ripple effect was undeniable. Employees were happier, more productive, and more engaged. Collaboration improved, conflicts decreased, and a sense of community permeated the office. The cleaner became a symbol of perseverance and hope, a quiet reminder of the power of being seen and supported. And the billionaire, who had once been feared for her strictness, was now respected and admired for her ability to combine authority with humanity. She had discovered that true influence did not come from fear or control, but from understanding, empathy, and a willingness to act in support of others. What started as a moment of surprise, a man sleeping in a chair, had grown into something much larger. It had transformed lives, reshaped company culture, and reminded everyone involved that small acts of kindness could create extraordinary ripples. The cleaner's life was no longer consumed by exhaustion and worry. His daughter's world was filled with love and stability, and the billionaire had discovered a new dimension of leadership and humanity. The office, once cold and mechanical, had become warm and alive, a place where people not only worked but cared for one another. The ripple continued, touching people far beyond the office walls. Employees carried the lessons into their homes, their communities, and their friendships. They shared stories of compassion, understanding, and support, inspiring others to act with kindness. The billionaire realized that her decision to act with empathy had extended far beyond a single act. It had created a culture, a movement even, that would influence countless lives for years to come. And through it all, the cleaner remained humble. He continued to work diligently, care for his daughter, and live with integrity and kindness. He had learned that even in hardship, there was hope, and that one person's understanding could change the course of another's life in ways unimaginable. He carried this lesson with him every day, quietly influencing those around him, just as the billionaire had influenced him. The office, the employees, the billionaire, and the cleaner all continued to grow from that moment. A simple act of noticing, listening, and helping had created a chain reaction that proved the power of empathy. And though it had begun with a man asleep in a chair, it had grown into something far greater. A reminder that humanity, compassion, and understanding could change lives, transform cultures, and inspire hope in ways that nothing else could. Time passed, and the effects of that single moment, the afternoon when a man had fallen asleep in her chair, continued to unfold in ways the billionaire had never imagined. The office, once purely about rules, efficiency, and precision, had transformed into a place filled with quiet understanding, shared support, and mutual respect. Employees felt recognized not only for the work they produced but for the human struggles they carried outside of the office. The small gestures of kindness she had introduced had created ripples that continued to grow, touching lives far beyond what she could see. The cleaner, the single father whose exhaustion had inadvertently started all of this, now moved through the office with a calm confidence. He had always been diligent, but now he was also lighter, more present, more engaged. His interactions with coworkers had changed. He offered encouragement, shared small advice about balancing work and life, and quietly supported those who were struggling, just as he had once been supported. People began to notice him differently, not just as the cleaning staff or the man who had been tired and overworked, but as someone who embodied resilience, integrity, and kindness. His daughter had also noticed the difference in her father. Evenings were no longer filled with exhaustion and worry. Instead, they had dinners together, did homework, and shared moments of laughter and play. She noticed the light in his eyes, the patience in his voice, and the way he could finally take time to enjoy small joys with her. The stability he had longed to provide was finally becoming a reality. And for him, seeing her happiness and security was a reward far greater than any money or recognition he could receive. The billionaire observed all of this quietly. She had always known her resources and influence were immense, but she had underestimated the power of empathy and understanding. She had learned that leadership was not simply about authority or decisions. It was about connection, about seeing people as whole humans with challenges, hopes, and dreams. She had come to understand that even small acts of support could ripple outward, affecting far more than she could immediately perceive. One simple act, acknowledging the exhaustion and struggle of a single father, had sparked change that was still spreading months later. Managers across the office began adopting the same approach. They checked in with their teams, asked questions about well-being, and offered support when employees faced difficulties. The culture shifted naturally without mandates or rules forcing it. People became more considerate, collaborative, and patient. Tensions decreased, morale improved, and employees began to take pride not only in their work but also in the way they treated each other. It was no longer just about meeting deadlines or targets. It was about creating a community within the office, where humanity and compassion were valued alongside results. The billionaire occasionally reflected on how far things had come. She remembered the day she had walked into her office and found him asleep in her chair. At first, it had been a moment of shock, almost irritation. She had expected to be frustrated, perhaps even angry, at what she perceived as carelessness. But that moment had shifted something inside her. It reminded her that people were not just workers or employees. They were human beings with complex lives, responsibilities, and struggles. And in that realization, she had discovered a form of leadership she had never experienced before. One built on understanding, empathy, and genuine care. The cleaner had become a quiet symbol of that change. His story spread among employees, not as gossip or drama, but as an example of perseverance and the power of being seen. It reminded everyone that life could be difficult, that struggles often went unnoticed, and that even a small act of support could make a significant difference. The office had become a place where people felt safe sharing their challenges, where asking for help was not a weakness, and where resilience was recognized and respected. One afternoon, the billionaire noticed something that warmed her heart. She saw the cleaner helping a new employee, someone who was struggling with a task and feeling overwhelmed. He guided them patiently, offering encouragement and reassurance. She realized that the support she had shown him was now being reflected in his actions toward others. The ripple effect was continuing, spreading through human interactions in ways she hadn't anticipated. Her initial act of empathy had become a catalyst, creating a culture of care that went far beyond her direct influence. Outside the office, the impact was equally profound. The cleaner's daughter continued to flourish, not just because of the material stability her father could now provide, but because of the presence and attention he could finally give her. Bedtime stories, laughter-filled dinners, and quiet conversations became part of their routine. She felt loved, supported, and secure, emotions that she had longed for and that her father had longed to provide. And for him, seeing her thrive was a reminder of why he had worked so hard for so long, and why his sacrifices had always been worth it. The billionaire also noticed subtle changes within herself. She found joy in seeing employees supported, in noticing small acts of kindness, and in knowing that her decisions had a positive impact. She realized that true influence did not come from enforcing rules, dictating orders, or accumulating wealth. It came from understanding people, connecting with them, and acting in ways that uplifted them. Leadership, she now understood, was about balancing authority with humanity and power with empathy. Months turned into a year, and the office culture continued to thrive. Employees were engaged, collaborative, and more willing to support one another. Managers continued to check in on the well-being of their teams, offer guidance, and provide support when challenges arose. The cleaner remained diligent and dedicated, but now he worked with a sense of purpose, pride, and confidence that had been absent before. His presence, his resilience, and his story had become part of the office's identity, a quiet reminder of the importance of empathy and understanding. The ripple effects extended beyond the office as well. Employees carried the lessons they had learned into their homes, friendships, and communities. They shared stories of support, acts of kindness, and the importance of noticing struggles that often went unseen. The billionaire's decision to act with compassion had sparked a chain reaction, inspiring countless others to consider empathy and understanding in their own lives. And all of this had begun with a simple, unexpected moment. A man falling asleep in her chair. One morning, the billionaire watched the cleaner and his daughter as they left the office together. He held her hand firmly, guiding her down the steps with care. She noticed the joy in their expressions, the lightness in their steps, and the warmth between them. It struck her how much impact one person could have on another's life, and how a small act of kindness could change the course of so many futures. She reflected on how far they had come together, how a single act of understanding had blossomed into lasting change, and how the world could be better if people simply chose to see and support one another. The cleaner's life was no longer dominated by fear, exhaustion, or struggle. He had stability, support, and hope. His daughter felt secure, loved, and happy. And the billionaire had discovered a new form of fulfillment, one that came not from power, wealth, or achievement, but from connection, empathy, and the quiet knowledge that she had made a difference in someone's life. What had begun as a shocking encounter had become a life-changing journey for all involved. In the office, the culture of compassion continued to grow. Employees noticed each other, offered help, and celebrated resilience. The billionaire encouraged these behaviors, not through rules or mandates, but through example. She had learned that true change came from genuine care, from listening, understanding, and acting with humanity. The office had become more than a workplace. It had become a community, a place where people felt valued, respected, and seen. The cleaner often reflected on his journey. He had faced hardship, exhaustion, and uncertainty, but he had also experienced recognition, support, and kindness. He had learned the power of being seen, the value of empathy, and the impact of small acts of understanding. And he had discovered that even the smallest moments, a smile, a kind word, a helping hand, could ripple outward, creating change far beyond what anyone could imagine. The billionaire, too, reflected on the lessons she had learned. She had realized that leadership was not just about decisions or control, it was about understanding the human beings behind the work. She had learned that small gestures of kindness could change lives, create culture, and inspire loyalty and hope. She had seen how one act of empathy had transformed not only the life of a single father and his daughter but the entire office and beyond. And she had learned that true success was measured not only in achievements but in the positive impact one could have on others. In the end, the story of the man who fell asleep in her chair became more than a story. It became a testament to the power of empathy, compassion, and understanding. It reminded everyone involved that life was not just about work, rules, or efficiency. It was about seeing people, listening to them, and offering support when it mattered most. It was about recognizing struggles that often went unnoticed and choosing to act with kindness. And in that quiet office, on that ordinary day, a billionaire and a single father had discovered something extraordinary: the power of human connection. The office continued to thrive, the cleaner continued to care for his daughter, and the billionaire continued to lead with both authority and empathy. And the lesson remained clear for everyone who witnessed it. Sometimes the simplest acts, the recognition of struggle, the offer of help, the choice to listen, could change lives in ways that nothing else could. What began as a shocking, almost inconvenient moment had become a legacy of humanity, kindness, and hope that would endure far beyond the walls of that office, inspiring everyone who experienced it to act with compassion and understanding in their own lives.